I had this part of me that would say, it's not really a problem if people are around while you're doing it. I'm just like a social crystal meth smoker. And I actually convinced myself that was true. I grew up in a situation that didn't look like trauma. I didn't know until I was almost 30 that having no boundaries and distorted parent child roles and being in a house where everyone screamed all the time or stonewalled or gaslit, that was just my normal. Drugs were more tempting to me than cult, and that's how I got out. I was very like, I don't want to make changes. You're the problem. He's the problem. The relationship's the problem. I'm not the problem. Oh, I was the problem. The problem was me.
Welcome back, everybody, to the I Decide Darlings podcast. I am Erin Lopez.
And I'm Lisa Cox. Hello.
Hello. Guys, stop for a second. It is chilly in Texas. Can we all take a moment and embrace the chill factor?
Yeah, I had to give her a hard time. She's like, oh, it's getting cold in Houston. I'm like, oh, really? Like
it's 70.
Yeah. How cold is it, Erin?
I mean, I kind of feel like it's in the... Okay, I'm not going to lie. I think it's probably in the 60s. Like, I do have on long sleeves and long pants today, so.
Okay, everybody in the upper Northeast hates you right now, but I still love you. We're kind of the same temperature as you are down in Houston right now, but I know.
I missed it. I'm jealous.
Well, we're excited today, you guys. It is, this is being recorded in mid-November. The holiday season is kicking off. I know it is around here. Christmas trees and lights are up in my house. How about you, Erin?
Same. We are up and running.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, we are thrilled today to have our guest, and I get to introduce her, and then we're going to shoot right to her and let her share a little bit about herself, and then we'll just get rolling with some really important and great topics. So I get to introduce Britt Frank. She is a licensed neuropsychotherapist and the author of the book, The Science of Stuck, named by Esquire and New York Magazine as a must-read. Her work has been featured in many media outlets, including Forbes, NPR, and the New York Times. She received her bachelor's from Duke University and her master's from the University of Kansas, right up the road from me, where she later became an award-winning instructor. Her work focuses on dismantling the myths that keep us stuck in the gap between what we know and what we do. Britt, welcome to the I Decide Darlings podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so happy to be here.
We're so glad you're here. Well, let's just start first with, would you just share with us a little bit about you, who you are, tell us a little bit of your background, and we just want to hear all the good stuff and the bad stuff. Tell us
all the things.
And everything in between.
Yeah.
Good, bad, ugly. So hearing you read the bio, it always cracks me up when I hear it's all true. Like that stuff is all true. So like it's not the complete story. It would, if I was to write a real bio, it would be Britt Frank, recovering hot mess disaster train wreck of a human being, couldn't figure out how to adult. So she did lots of drugs and didn't eat food for a while. Then ate all the food. Then dated all of the people that you read about online, not to date, and did all of the bad things somewhere along the way, got her crap together, became a therapist. And yeah, so it's an accurate bio, but it is incomplete. So yeah.
Well, I think that bio that you just said is the best bio in the world because it's relatable.
Yeah.
It's a relatable what you say. You know, I mean, I love what you've done and it's so impressive. But when you give it to us like that, it's just so relatable. And I appreciate that.
It's real. And I found that there's a thing in the therapy world where therapists, like classically trained therapists, are told you have to lock down who you are and just be a complete brick wall. And I think that's crap. I don't think that creates any kind of conditions for growth or healing or high performance. And so I've practiced my own rogue style of like, this is me. Therapy is not about me, but I will share snippets of my story if it's in service of the person in front of me. Because who wants to talk to a perfect, I go to a therapist. If my therapist was all shiny and perfect, I'd be out the door because no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've literally known you for like 20 minutes now, but you're so good at just being real and like letting people just, be themselves and whatever. So you're doing something good, sister. Okay. Before we get started too, I need to know Kansas and Duke, amazing. And then Lisa is down the road in Springfield, Missouri. And I grew up in Kansas City. So tell us where you're from and where you are.
Okay, that's funny. So I'm from New York. I'm a born and raised New York girl. And then in my travels, I moved to California. I went to Duke. So that was in North Carolina. I lived in Arizona. Sometimes just picking up and moving sometimes following the boy because sometimes just, I don't know what to do with myself. So I'm just going to go here and hope that I don't follow me where I go. That doesn't work. Spoiler alert. Don't do that. And then I ended up in Kansas City and I fell in love with it. It is the greatest city.
Yeah,
and like, as I found it's like, people who aren't, well, now that Taylor Swift is here, everyone, like Kansas City has a big spotlight on it.
Yeah.
But it's fabulous. So I found a therapist here. This was where I did my personal healing. And then that's where I went to grad school and became a therapist. And my husband's from New York and he ended up here. And so this is home.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I agree with you. I feel like I'm glad Taylor Swift kind of put it on the map, but I'm kind of like, there's part of me that I'm like, no, we were already cool. People just didn't really know it yet.
So true.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I was born and raised there. As you heard earlier, I live in Houston, but Kansas City love to you. Kansas City
so
love.
So much love, Casey love.
I went to high school in Kansas City at St. Teresa's Academy for girls.
Okay. That's just weird that all three of us are here together now at this time.
I know.
And her daughter lives in New York. Let's just keep going with the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, shall we?
Well, okay. So Britt, we want to go back again because we don't want to move anywhere too fast. So you were a hot mess. Tell us a little bit more about that. Like you had some crazy times that brought you to some really big good times. How did that happen?
So I think for a lot of people, trauma sort of like it makes me cringe when I hear that word now because it's become the Insta social media buzzword where now everything is trauma. So like, I don't like the way you just drank your coffee, so you're traumatizing and triggering me, to like abuse. It's just a word that has become it. Now it means everything. So it means nothing. But I think for a lot of people, I grew up in a situation that didn't look like trauma. So I didn't know until I was almost 30 that, having no boundaries and distorted parent-child roles and being in a house where everyone screamed all the time or stonewalled or gaslit, that was just my normal. And so I would never have said, that's not trauma. Like I was never in a war. Up until a point, I would have set trigger warning for people listening. Like I have assault trauma, but at the time I didn't have like any type of body injury trauma. So I wouldn't have said I have trauma. It's just like, doesn't everybody's family do this? And then as I got into relationships that were increasingly more and more toxic, and then violence, and then adding drugs to that mix, it became evident pretty clear that like, I'm not okay. I'm like really not okay. And I thought it was just me. I just thought I am the problem. My brain doesn't brain. I got sent out of the human factory, missing all the software, and I couldn't figure it out. And so I keep things really real now because life is complicated, but the healing processes shouldn't be. And using all these big clinical la-di-da words, it shouldn't be like that. It should be, you have a brain, here's driver's ed for the brain, so you can know what you're driving. Like when I was 16, I learned to drive a car and I sucked at it, but I was able to maneuver around. And when I learned the equivalent for my own brain, I started to realize, oh, this makes sense. And in all my time as a clinician, I have never seen symptoms not make sense in context. So like, I might not understand why the guy on the street is experiencing what he's going through, but up close, everyone makes sense. And that's incredibly, well, it's good news and it's bad news because then the burden was on me to make some changes. And I was very like, I don't want to make changes. You're the problem. He's the problem. The relationship's the problem. I'm not the problem. Oh, I was the problem. The problem was me. And that's great news because if the problem is me, I'm empowered to do something about it. And so I did. Yay.
Did you have a moment or one that you can speak of that like, what took you from being a hot mess to saying like, something's got to change, something's got to give? Like, I know you talked somewhere about like hitting rock bottom. Like, so what was that moment where you told yourself like, okay, enough is enough. Like, let's get it together, or at least try.
Have you ever been to the Grand Canyon? Like, have you ever seen the situation there? Okay. So my rock bottom was more like, I'm going to go in and down, take a look around, scoop out some more trail, climb back out, go back in, and continue until I have this large canyon spanning many, many years and miles. There were many moments where it was, this has to change. But like most people, like, great, I'm making my changes and now forget it. This is hard. I don't want to anymore. Or life happens, or legitimately things happen outside of your control. And so it wasn't linear. I did have if we're going to define like what was my final rock bottom moment, like what was the last time I went down into the canyon, was I was in this really disgusting, and I tell this story on stage when I do keynote speeches, which never gets any like, yay, this is such a fun story, but I think it's important. I was in this really disgusting bathroom at like 5 a.m. smoking meth. And I had this part of me that would say, it's not really a problem if people are around while you're doing it. I'm just like a social crystal meth smoker. And I actually convinced myself that that was true. And that sounds insane, but it's the same. It's the drug addict equivalent of the calories don't count on holidays and birthdays and Super Bowl Sunday and Thanksgiving and whatever. And so we're all pretty skilled at telling ourselves stories. But so that was my story. As long as someone else is doing it with me, I'm fine. But that day it was 5 a.m. I'm in this disgusting bathroom, stains on the wall, dirty syringes on the floor. And that was this is me. I am the problem here. And I need to do something, or I'm not going to, and this sounds dramatic, but it was true. I'm not going to survive another chapter of this particular story. So I really need to close this book and start a new one. And that was, if there was a moment where I decided I made and I know you guys are really big on that. I made the decision. I decided this is what happened. That was one of if I had to pinpoint one, it would be that one. Because after that day, I never used it again. And life started to get better in a lot more linear fashion than it did before.
Before that day, did other people try and help you stop your behaviors?
And I was so stubborn and manipulative, and I'm just like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Everything is fine. And I convinced myself I was fine. I joined a religious cult for a while, and that was a nice reprieve because I was really good at. I liked being told what to do, because if you, and I get the appeal of cults, because for someone who had no sense of personality, who am I? What am I about? What do I want? How do I do life? A cult gives you all of those answers. It's again, 10 out of 10 don't recommend doing that. However, it was a really nice break where someone said, if you read this and wear this and think this and say this and do this, then you're going to be good. We will all love you, and you get a free ride away from all your feelings. Sign me up. That was a short-lived foray into bypassing my own crap, but I have a really interesting insight into why cults are appealing, and I do get the allure of them.
Okay, that's so crazy to me, because I was just talking about cults not too long ago. How do you even get out of a cult? I mean, I know how you get into a cult, because like you said, I think there probably are so many things appealing about it. How in the world do you get out of a cult?
So I got in and out the same way. So I was in my party girl, drug using, and it wasn't fun. I wasn't enjoying myself, but I'm going out and being 20 and whatever. And then it was, I met these guys at Duke, actually, and they were part of a sect of this broader cult. And so they brought me to a group meeting, and I thought this was the greatest thing I had never experienced. People in a room happy to see me when I walked in. Like that was like crack to my brain. It was, oh my gosh, I'm walking into this room and everyone is so happy to see me. And so then after I graduated, I mean, cults, the murder cults are not the only kind. So the ones on Netflix are the murder cults and the sex cults, but there's a lot of groups that qualify as cults that are not quite as life and death. And so I got in from drugs, and I got out by following a boy who did drugs. And so I can't say I mean, I wouldn't want to repeat the past, but I get the function of my drug addictions, and yay, drugs were more tempting to me than cults. And that's how I got out.
Wow.
Gosh.
Don't recommend. Just deal with your feelings. It's so much easier if you just deal with your feelings. But that's me.
Well, I think it's so nice to speak it out loud, because it's not just you. There's people out there listening. You know what I mean? There's people listening probably right now that are like, I understand exactly what Britt is saying. So, oh my gosh. So, okay. So you got out, you started having a linear path to a better life, to success, to momentum. You talk a lot about momentum. And so share a little bit of that with us. I mean, how did you take all those feelings you just shared and all those experience and everything and then put it into, a couple incredible books and experiences that are now serving people.
Yeah, I like my I decides more now. Like I'm going to decide to write a book, and that was a great decision and a hard one, and it changed a lot of things. And I'm going to decide to become an aerial circus performer at the age of 37 after a 20-year chemical habit and shenanigans, and I was able to do that. It really, and this is so infuriating, and I really hate that this was the solution, but it came down to, I call them micro yeses, like steps that are so small that they can't even qualify as a baby step. And I'll give you an example. So when I had my in the bathroom, oh my gosh, I have a problem kind of moment, I made a phone call to a friend, and I'm like, and I have trauma, and I've been lying to everybody, and I've got all this stuff. What am I going to do? And she's like, Britt, when was the last time you ate anything? And I was like, oh, wait, I need to eat something. I haven't eaten in days. I haven't showered or slept in days. It was a hot mess. And so this woman sat with me on the phone for over an hour eating a yogurt spoonful by spoonful. That is a micro yes. And big lives are built on the back of tiny micro yeses. And everyone gets really annoyed when I talk about them. Like, that's dumb. I know it's silly, but it's science. The reason
I love it.
I don't think it's dumb.
No.
I like it.
Thank you. Okay, I appreciate that. But it sounds frustrating. It's like, well, how much, like a baby step for a fitness goal would be take a walk around the block after work. But the reason we don't do that is because even though it seems small to our brains, it's too big of a step. A micro yes for a fitness goal is put your left sneaker by the front door, and that's all you do today. There is nothing else to do but that. And tomorrow you put your right sneaker by the door, and that's all there is. And everyone's like, how am I supposed to get anything done if I'm taking steps that are that small, microscopic small, micro yes? Well, the pace you start at is not the pace you stay at. Micro yeses get you from the state of inertia where I feel stuck to now I'm building momentum in the direction that I want to go.
And don't you think like these micro yeses, which I love that you term it that, the micro yeses, like it's a win. Like I feel like we set ourselves up for failure a lot of times, because even making the walk around the block after work to get us in that, if we don't, we're like, oh, I'm terrible, I might as well just eat the whole pantry and then not do it again. Versus like, you know what, I can put the shoe by the front door, and then it's like a little micro like pat on the shoulder, and then the next day and the next day. So I mean, I love that. I mean, we teach our teams, and we have such this mindset of like success loves speed. And I feel like people don't realize, like, it takes those little, as you call them, micro yeses to get to that speed where, like you said, then you're out the door. Then you're like, here I come. How do you teach that to, like, now that you kind of have the hat on with your therapy, like, where do you start with somebody when they come to you and they're like, listen, I'm a hot mess express. Like, where do I start?
We always start with, and this question again really bothered me when it was asked to me because it put the ball in my court. And the question is, well, what are your choices? And so like if someone comes to me, not sure if they want to stay or leave a marriage, for example, like, do I stay or do I go is way too big of a question to start with, because I don't know what your choices are. If you have no kids, if you are independently wealthy and you're not financially dependent on your partner and you don't work together, that's going to tee up a lot of choices that are very different than if you're medically dependent, financially dependent, you have little children, and you both have built a business together where both of your families all depend on that income for their well-being. And so we don't start with what do I do? We start with what is the menu of options actually available to you? Often the phrase I feel stuck, what that actually means is I am not a fan of any of these choices. I don't like any of them. I don't want to do any of them reasonably. But we don't start with the what do we do? And we definitely don't start with the why am I stuck? We always start with what are your choices? Because that's going to determine our next step. Always.
That is so good.
I feel like when I read something that you wrote, and it's the whole like, why am I stuck? And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was kind of like, I don't have to know why I'm stuck right now. And for some reason, I was like, you know what? It's so true for a lot of things that I think we're, especially being a mom and a business person and everything, it's like, got to figure it out, like, why? But I loved it that you said, like, in my own words, like, you don't have to know. Like, we'll figure it out. Like, you don't have to have the reason why you're stuck. But I love that you just said, like, what are the menu of options?
Yeah, because that determines everything. And the why, it's so fun. So like I became a therapist because I was obsessed with why I was doing what I was doing and then why all the other humans were doing what they were doing. But even if you like even let's say you're stuck and you're with a procrastination, bedtime procrastination, you're up till 3 a.m. doom scrolling. Well, I can tell you why. It's because your life is really loud all day long and you want some alone time and some quiet time. And that revenge bedtime procrastination gives you some alone time. Great. Now you're still stuck. Having the insight doesn't create the transformation. And so start with why is really good business development advice. And you're both businesswomen, right? So, Simon Sinek's work, Start With Why, is like the gold standard of business development. And it's good for that. Start with why, yay, for your business. Start with why, no, for any type of personal stuckness. So why can't I stop the habit? Why can't I start the habit? Why do I do the same thing over and over again? These questions have an answer, but you don't need to know it to get yourself moving. Once momentum takes over, then we can ask why. But often once people are feeling better and moving, they don't really care about why. It's like, I don't care why I'm stuck. I want to get unstuck. And that's what micro yeses get you on the path to doing.
That's one of my favorite things I've heard. Honestly, the micro yeses. I think it gives people almost a grace that they need to heal. And I feel like so many times there's so many people out there telling you what you're doing wrong and what you shouldn't be doing, instead of having that type of approach, which to me feels like a very heartfelt approach, because it's basically saying that almost like you don't care why they're stuck, and you don't, you just want to know what little tiny thing can they do to get started. And I don't know, I just love that so much. I think that's mind blowing. And actually for our industry, so we're in our own kind of cult. we're network marketers and have been for 30 years, forever. And I'm teasing about that. It is not a cult, but a lot of people call us a cult. But in ours, Erin and I specifically are in health and wellness. And so we're working with people and coaching with clients and customers on a daily basis that are really struggling with the stuck of it all, and with how can they dig themselves out of the way they've been eating for all their life, or the non-exercise and things like that. So I personally am going to use this tool, and I'm so excited to have it. And I think that Erin, so many times we go in fast and furious, with a solution to their problem, but yet they still aren't ready to get started with all that, and we can just find like one little tiny, I love to put one shoe by the front door. Like that to me is mind blowing.
Because it works. Because I think Erin said it, when you keep those little promises, you get those little wins. And that's not just a mindset thing. Keeping a promise to yourself and getting a win releases a little micro shot of dopamine. And that tells your brain, cool, that felt good. Let's do that again. And then that creates an upward loop versus why can't I do the thing that releases cortisol, which then creates a downward loop. I mean, that's simplistic, but generally speaking, a micro dose of dopamine is better than trying to take a big giant step, falling on your face, beating yourself up, and then waiting another 6 months or a year or 5 or 20 before you start again. We want to get those wins now. And with the why, and the pushback I've gotten on this is, well, I have ADHD, or my brain is organized in this way. And I'm not saying that those things aren't a factor, but let's say you have ADHD. Great. This question is still going to be, what are your choices? Whether or not the origin is a diagnostic thing or a environmental thing, it doesn't change the question. What are your choices? And then how do we make them as small as possible so you can get your wins? I don't like the word always, but I've never not seen that work. Even when I was in a really abusive situation, this is like when you mix like a toxic relational dynamic with speed, you get a lot of shenanigans. And so it wasn't about blaming myself or creating a narrative around my worthiness. It's okay. Right now, it doesn't feel like a good choice to get out of this today, but today maybe I can tell someone what's going on. Today, maybe my choice is to find an online place where I can get information. Today, maybe I can get job training so I can up my skills. So perhaps financially, it makes more sense for me to leave. So there are always those little choices. And anytime you're not doing a thing you want to do, it's because you're taking steps that are too big. And remember, the logical part of your brain that says, well, that shouldn't be too big. This is a small step. The part of your brain that calls the shots is in the back. And the back of your brain likes small, like success likes speed, but success requires slow and small to start, just to start. And then once you solve for the starting gate, most people know the feeling of once I get to the gym, I'm fine. Once I've cooked the food, I'm fine. It's how do we solve for that gap between the starting gate and the first mile? And that's what micro yeses do.
Oh, it's so good.
I'm so curious, Britt. And again, like how you said the word trauma, like it's kind of, a little can be overused, can be whatever. I kind of feel that way about mental health, and like and it's a touch, because I have two teenage girls, and when I was their age, the word mental health and like everything was not even a thing. And so now, because I feel like of athletes and celebrities and what have you, and social media, I can't tell you a week that doesn't go by that they're like, well, her mental health is, I'm like, what? So like, what's your take on anxiety? And we read, Lisa and I were talking yesterday about something you put about depression, and like, that there are other reasons that we could be depressed, which we would love to talk about. But like, what's your take on anxiety? Because I feel like there are so many people out there that have anxiety now. Is it anxiety? I don't know. I feel like you would have such a good take on like, what is anxiety to you? And I don't know, is it overused?
I have a hot take on anxiety.
Oh, good. Oh, right.
So actually, Inside Out 2 is probably, I think, the first and only time I've seen anxiety depicted in a way that makes sense with what it actually is and does in our brain. Like in Inside Out 2, anxiety is trying to help. We use this battle. I have an anxiety attack. I'm having a panic attack. I need to fight my brain. I need to kick my inner critic to the curb. But if you think of all of those battle metaphors, if the problem is in your brain and it's attacking you, then where are you supposed to go to access safety? And so we want to reframe. Anxiety is not a monster sitting on your shoulder that waits for your weak moments and then attacks you. Anxiety is the smoke alarm of the brain, or like your check engine light. And so if you're driving your car and your check engine light comes on, you're not going to go to a mechanic and then get told, well, your check engine light is on, therefore you have check engine light disorder. That's insane. But that's what happens with anxiety. We go to the doctor with anxiety, and then we get told, oh, you have anxiety. That means you have an anxiety disorder. Anxiety, I'm not saying it's not problematic. It is. I've had it my whole life. It stinks. It's awful. And sometimes it's medically threatening. However, anxiety is the signal, not the problem. Somewhere we have equated this symptom of anxiety as the symptom equals the problem. It doesn't. Anxiety is your sign that something is not right. It might be with your family. It might be a relationship. It might be an environmental thing. I can't tell you how many people have come to me with their self-diagnosed, like I was on TikTok and now I have an anxiety disorder. I'm like, but you don't eat. You eat 300 calories a day and you smoke cigarettes, you drink a pot of coffee, you have no friends and you're isolated. Like, is that an anxiety disorder, or do we have some environmental things that we might want to address? And so I'm very big on not, I have anxiety, therefore it's disordered. It's okay, you have anxiety. Great. Let's figure out what that signal is pointing toward. So mental health is really like the body shop for the brain. It's like, okay, let's get under the hood and see what's going on. But I do not subscribe to you have a symptom, therefore this is who you are and this is why you are stuck. It's like anxiety is trying to help. Think of it like a toddler in the kitchen. A toddler in the kitchen is going to make a big mess and be very unhelpful, but they're trying to help. They want to bake. They're covered in flour and glue, but like they want it to help. Think of anxiety as a well-meaning but unskilled friend who's trying to help you go, there's a problem somewhere. We need to look under the hood.
And what would you recommend for a person that's going through anxiety attacks? Let's say they're at that point that their body is signaling them to where they're landing in the hospital. Yeah. Would you say therapy first? Because what my fear is they're going to be put on just drugs and to smooth it over, and I don't want that for this friend. But what would you recommend?
So that's a real problem, but it's also if someone thinks they're having a heart attack, I'll always tell them go to the hospital first to rule out a medical. I'm not an MD. I'm not a doctor.
Right.
And so I would be unethical and dangerous if I was like, you don't ever need to worry about your body because it's, and I'm not saying it's all in your mind, but if you think you're going to die, go to the hospital to make sure that you're not in fact having a heart attack or that you're not in fact going into whatever the thing is. But once we've ruled out it's not medical, then we want to figure out again, what are your choices? If someone is near death 10 times a day, that's going to change up their options. Like they wouldn't even be able to do the let's go under the hood and look. For them, the first option is we got to stabilize you and we got to figure out how to help your body and your nervous system come down enough that we can then even talk about things, because you can't figure out a problem in the same brain state that's creating the signal. So first we got to shift your body into a state where logic is available. And what are your choices is a question that helps do that. If someone's having I don't like calling them panic attacks. I call them panic episodes or just panic, or just the alarms going off. Okay, if your alarm's going off, great. What are your choices right now to feel a little bit safer? Do we need to move locations? Do you need to go outside? It's cold right now. Cold is a really good medicine for anxiety. It's really hard to stay panicking when you're outside shivering. And so I don't like being cold, but it's very useful for anxiety. And there's lots of little tricks and tips for that to bring your brain's alarm system. First, we turn the alarm off, then we figure out what happens.
Oh, that's so good.
Britt, the way you describe all of this is really like, I think the first time I've ever heard a lot of this described this way. And it's such in a positive way, that I think I love your take on it that, I mean, again, and I love all of we're such visual as women, right? Too. Like it's the check engine light, like anxiety is, the check engine light and the mental health is the overall, like I mean, a lot of things I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like mind blowing the way that you're describing this.
And I'm not minimizing the reality of the pain. I've gotten when I started being more public, people would be like, you're minimizing my trauma. I'm like, I take psych meds. I go to therapy. I have a childhood trauma history a mile long, plus all the crap I did to myself in reaction to that. So I'm not minimizing the reality of trauma or pain, or I'm not saying mental health isn't important. I'm saying like, let's just talk about what we're talking about. Like, let's not try to flower. You're triggering me. Okay. Why don't you just say my body feels really scared right now instead of you're triggering me, or like you're gaslighting me. I don't like the way I feel when you talk to me like that. And so going back into choice, one of my first choices was not to use all the therapy language. And I'm a licensed therapist saying that. So like, I don't even use that language with myself or my clients.
I like that.
It is so true. Because the second you hear gaslight, this, that, I mean, it's like flag, flag, flag.
I'm not familiar with the term gaslight. Will you explain that?
Ooh, yeah. And it's a thing. And it's
I've heard it, but I've never used that term and I'm not really familiar. I'm not sure other people are too.
It's become another word that means everything. So the word comes from an Alfred Hitchcock movie where the husband was trying to make the wife feel like she was crazy. So he'd go around because he wanted her inheritance. So he'd go around switching lights on and off. And like back then they used gas lights. So that's why it's called gaslighting. Okay. And so he would turn things on and off and she'd be like, oh my God, what's going on? And he'd say, what are you talking about? I don't see any lights going off and on. So gaslighting by definition is a form of manipulation where someone intentionally tries to make you doubt your own perception. So if I walk in on my partner cheating and somehow they convince me, no, this is just a friend. And like she was cold because she fell in the lake and I had to get naked in order to warm her body up. And so you didn't see what you saw. Like that sounds ridiculous, but you'd be surprised what stories end up getting tossed around. So, but it's not only high level manipulation. I'll give you an example of everyday gaslighting. And this is going to make some people angry. So if this is you, don't shame yourself. This is just for, hey, this is not the best way about going about things, but no shame. I don't deal in shame. And this is true for kids. If a parent comes home, let's say a mom comes home from work and she's had a horrible day and she's crying. And let's say her little kid says to her, Mommy, why are you sad? This kiddo is very accurately picking up on mom is sad. when mom says, no, I'm not sad, honey, everything is fine, I just, had something in my eye, that's called unintentional gaslighting. The kid sees what they see, and the mom is saying, no, you're not seeing that. Now, the mom's intentions are really good, right? Like, parents legitimately don't want to burden their children. But a better way, not better, but a more skillful way would be, you know what, you're seeing mommy cry, and yes, mommy's upset, but big feelings are okay, and mommy has help, and you don't need to worry about doing anything about this. That would be better, because it's validating the kiddo's perception. Like, I see you crying. Parents don't need to pretend to be fine in front of their I had a kids practice early in my career when I was a baby therapist. I had a play therapy practice. And if kids are picking up on things, you don't have to dump on them, but you can validate, yeah, you know what, you saw mom and dad fighting, and that probably felt really big. And so let's talk about it, but it's not your fault. There's nothing you need to do. So gaslighting, to bring this home, is anytime you try to tell someone that what they saw or heard is not actually what they saw or heard.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that to me. That makes a lot of sense. And one of the best things I heard recently, similar to what you were just saying, is I heard a woman, and she was talking about how to talk to your kids. And I have grown kids, but I still like to learn. I still want to make sure I'm doing things the right way with my grown daughters. But she said to her children, it's not your job to make me happy. And I loved that. I thought it takes so much pressure off a child who may see the parents upset, the parents fighting, the mom crying, or whatever. I love you for caring about me, but it's not your job to make me happy, and I don't want you to ever feel like it is.
I love that so much. 100 good. I mean, what might have been different had I heard that as a kid? And I know a lot of people who either were just told, no, what you're seeing is wrong, or like, here's some food, here's a snack, so we can eat the feelings away, or whatever the thing was that was done. The truth is powerful. And how loving is that for a parent to say to a kid, you're seeing what you're seeing, and not your job to make me feel better or happy.
Yeah.
Like, I love that so many times.
I love that too. I saw something that you wrote about eustress versus de-stress. Will you share a little bit on that for us?
Yeah. Oh, you did do your research. I'm like, oh, wow, I posted. Okay. So we talk about stress, like we talk about anxiety. Like, stress is this monolithic, awful thing that will somehow destroy our health and our well-being in our lives. But stress is like cholesterol. There are two kinds of cholesterol. One's good, one's not good. The two types of stress are called eustress, and it's spelled EU stress. So EUSTRESS. Eustress is the good stress, and then distress is the bad stress. But not having any stress in your nervous system is like being in an awesome car that has no gas. Like, eustress is that get up and go juice that really compels us to show up, to execute, to reach for the big goals. Once we've micro-yesed our way out of the starting gate, we need to have a stress response in order to have any type of energy. The problem is that when distress is online, that's the kind of stress that eats away at our well-being and causes health problems and shuts us down. But the goal is not to live a stress-free life. The goal is to feel like I have some agency and choices in my stress. And so eustress is just that's the physiology of motivation. When people say I want motivation, what they're saying is I want stress. I want eustress in my body. I want to get some of that up juice. It's the gas pedal.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
My life is going to be drastically different. I can't wait, Britt, to not only tell people that I now know what gaslight, where it came from. I had no idea that it came from Sherlock Holmes. I'm also, next time that I'm like having a moment, I'm going to be like, don't worry, this is eustress, not distress. This is eustress. I mean, so many good nuggets. And I'm like, it's so true. And such a positive way to look at all of these things of the gasoline, the car. You're super talented. I'm curious what your life looks like now. Like, the childhood that you have, like, are you still close with your parents? What does that look like? Your relationships? I know you're married now. Like, having gone through what you've gone through and the addictions and, the trauma, as a child, what does life look like now?
It's pretty peaceful now.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I left New York and ended up in Kansas. So if that tells you anything about my relationship with my family of origin, is not the greatest, but that's the beautiful part about humaning, is that if you don't get it from your family where you quote should get it, that doesn't mean you're out of luck. I have built a beautiful community, and my husband had amazing friends when we met. And so I sort of got adopted into that group as well. And so I have amazing girlfriends who live all over the place. And again, you don't need the friendship thing as adults. It's like, if you're not besties, then it doesn't count. It's like, we can define friendship however we want. And so having friends that are deep soul level friends are good, but having friends that you just do stuff with, also good. And my life is pretty quiet now. So I'm very I mean, that's like, it doesn't seem like I'd be an introvert, but I'm very happy under a bridge, like a troll, just sort of eating my snacks. And I'll come out occasionally and then I go back. But I have hobbies. I eat food. I sleep. I have relationships. It's all very strange to me.
Do you go to the Chiefs games?
I have not gone to the games. I do watch them.
What?
I know. I know. I gotta fix that.
You gotta fix that.
Well, I mean, we go to one a year because it's a big production to go to the Chiefs games. It's and it's pretty easy to sit by the fireplace and watch it outside, But I was just curious. I was just kind of being silly since you're right up the road in Kansas City, and since our Chiefs are doing so well this year.
I know. Yeah, I need to get to a game at some point. I will. But
it is true. It's not just going to the game at the Chiefs. And I really don't think it's like that in any other city. I mean, I grew up going to like every Chiefs game, and it was like church. I mean, you would get up and go at like 8:00 in the morning for a night game. I mean, it was crazy. But that'll have to be on your Kansas City to-do list.
Maybe if she wants to be a troll under the bridge, she might not want to go to a
It's a lot of people in it.
It's a lot
our
of
friend
people.
group here. No, like, I'm the last to show up and usually the first to leave things. Like, I love my people, but I also need to be a bridge troll a lot of the time in order to recharge and reset. I'm highly sensitive. I'm what they would call neurodivergent. And so I do need a lot of recharge and alone time. And I've been fortunate that I've been able to build a life that accommodates that. And I know not everyone can, and I wasn't always able to. I can now. And so I feel very, very grateful that I have the ability to do that.
Oh, you've built a beautiful life for yourself. And so, okay, I want to talk about the book really fast. And then I want you to tell our audience where they can follow you and find you, and if they can work with you, how all of that stuff. But first, let's talk about your book. I think it's your most recent book, right? Okay, share with us about that. I am very excited to hear about it. Science of Stuck.
The Science of Stuck is the book I needed when I started, and it didn't exist because all of us have a to be read stack a mile high and no bandwidth and no inclination or time to read all of the books. And so what I wished existed was someone to read all the books and then give me just a few nuggets from all of the different areas. So Science of Stuck is not the full deep dive, in-depth analysis thing. It's like what we talked about with anxiety. That's chapter 2. Here's just a few things about boundaries. Here's just a few things about intimacy. Here's just a few things about habits so we can get you moving. And I write the way I speak. It's based on science, but it's all very the best compliment I ever got on the book was someone told me, I hate to read and I don't read anything, but I read your book in a day. And I was like, sweet, that makes me very happy. And it has lots of actionables. So I got frustrated reading self-help books where I'm like, great, what do? I don't want to read all the fluff. I just need someone bottom line this for me. And so that book is the one I needed. It didn't exist, or maybe it did. I couldn't find it. So I wrote it. And it's been so much fun it's sort of like my love letter to all the different teachers, mentors, modalities, techniques that I've picked up and learned, a few of my own mixed in there. And it was so much fun to get a book deal on my wedding day. That was cool. Aww. After hundreds of rejections and you're not good enough and we don't want to mess with you or whatever, getting a call that I got a book deal on my wedding day was pretty cool.
Well, we're starting a book club and we're going to read, we'll definitely put your book in our rotation. We're going to read during our book club, we're going to read out loud for 15 minutes a week and then discuss. And so we can introduce more books of self-help to people. And this sounds amazing for that. So we're definitely going to do that. We're going to put yours in there.
Yay.
And tell us where our listeners can find you? And what's the best place? Your Instagram or your website? What do you suggest?
Yeah, so I have a new book coming out in May called Align Your Mind, which I'm really excited about. It's sort of based on the Inside Out 2 idea that you have all the different casts of characters in your mind, and here's how you can help them all get along. So you can pre-order that on Amazon or wherever you buy books.
Okay.
Instagram is just my name, @Britt Frank, and it's just me on there. I don't have a social media team, so I comment, I respond, I post. It's like, come say hi. That's where I've met some of my closest friends, is on Instagram. And my website is brittfrank.com.
Amazing. We'll have all this in the show notes as well. Well, before Erin closes, I just want to say thank you, Britt. I feel like, well, this is me during the podcast. I'm just taking notes and notes. And I feel like I learned so much from you today. I think you are wonderful. I think you are amazingly talented. And I think that the way that you connect, I feel like the way you connected just with us today is a gift. And so thank you for your time today.
Tears.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
I just, everything Lisa said, I was just thinking in my head, like, you're such a beautiful soul. And it has been, thank you for sharing like your story and being real and honest and giving us like visual, tactical things that, again, you blew my mind today. Like I'm walking away from this a better person. So Britt Frank, you're amazing. We can't wait to continue our friendship with you. We'll have everything in the show notes. And we hope that everyone listening to this is sharing this out, because there are so many nuggets that you can take away from this, from everything we talked about, from anxiety, from everything. You too can learn what gaslighting, where it originated from. I mean, but honestly, I mean, we both took a ton of notes. Share this out. Britt Frank, thank you for being a part of the I Decide Darlings. And ladies and gentlemen, we will see you soon.
See you
Thanks,
soon.
everybody.
You've been listening to the I Decide Darlings podcast. If this podcast touched your heart, please share it with your friends and family right after you subscribe yourself.
Don't forget to head over to iDecideBook.com and grab a copy of our favorite book and daily journal. As always, thank you for being here, and we can't wait for you to hear our next episode.